1969 was a year of big changes, big moments, and some big shocks. So, today on this video, I'm going to look back at some of the news stories of 1969. And one of the biggest stories, if not the biggest story of 1969, was the Apollo 11 moon landing. On July 16th, 1969, NASA launched a rocket carrying three astronauts: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Their mission? To do what no human had done before: set foot on the moon. After a tense journey, the lunar module, nicknamed Eagle, separated from the command module and descended towards the moon's surface. Neil Armstrong had to manually take control after realizing their planned landing site was covered in boulders. But on July 20th, 1969, they safely touched down on the moon's Sea of Tranquility, announcing, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed."
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
And over 600 million people worldwide watched as Armstrong stepped onto the moon, saying the legendary words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Buzz Aldrin soon followed, and together they planted an American flag, took photos, and even got a call from President Nixon, who told them, "Because of what you have done, the heavens have become part of man's world." The astronauts safely returned to Earth on July 24th to a hero's welcome. While the astronauts were taking their first steps on the moon, the Vietnam War was still raging, and back home, America was deeply divided. Protests against U.S. involvement had been growing for years, but in 1969, it reached a whole new level. Protests erupted across the country, especially on college campuses. Students held sit ins and marches and sometimes even clashed with police. On October 15th, 1969, the biggest anti war demonstration in U.S. history took place: the moratorium to end the war in Vietnam. Millions of Americans participated nationwide: students, teachers, veterans, and even politicians. The success of the first moratorium was followed a month later on November 15th, when protesters gathered for a march in Washington, D.C. An estimated 500,000 people gathered across from the White House for a rally where Pete Seeger led them in singing "Give Peace a Chance." For young men across America, December 1st, 1969, was one of the most nerve wracking days of their lives. That night, the U.S. held its first draft lottery since World War II. Across the country, families huddled around their TVs or radios, anxiously waiting to hear if their loved ones' birthdays were amongst the first drawn. If your birthday was in the first 100 drawn, you had a very high chance of being drafted. The draft lottery made the war close and personal for millions of American families. No longer was it just something happening on the evening news. Now it was their sons, brothers, friends, neighbors being drafted and sent overseas. 1969 was also the year that sparked a movement for gay rights. It all started in the very early hours of June 28th, 1969, at a small bar in New York City's Greenwich Village, the Stonewall Inn. Back then, police raids on gay bars were frequent, and bar management usually knew about the raids beforehand due to police tip offs. During a typical raid, the lights were turned on, customers were lined up, and their IDs were checked. These raids were usually quick and routine, but something was different that night. As police forced patrons out onto the streets, tensions rose. And this time, instead of scattering, the people didn't leave, and a large crowd started to form. When the officers started to get rough with customers, the crowd erupted. For 6 days, protesters clashed with the police. Stonewall didn't immediately change laws, but it did change history. A year later, on June 28th, 1970, the first Pride marches were held in New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago to mark the anniversary of the riots, and from there, the movement took off. One of the biggest political scandals of 1969 didn't happen in Washington, D.C. It happened on a small island off the coast of Massachusetts. On the night of July 18th, Senator Ted Kennedy attended a party and then left with 28-year-old Mary Jo Kopechne, who had previously worked on his brother Robert F. Kennedy's 1968 presidential campaign. During the drive, with Kennedy behind the wheel, their car went off a bridge and into the water. Kennedy got out, Mary Jo didn't. He later said he tried to save her but couldn't. But instead of calling for help right away, he left the scene, eventually returning to his hotel, and he didn't report the accident until the following morning, after he found out the car had already been discovered. The Chappaquiddick scandal raised a lot of questions. First, like, what the heck? Why didn't Kennedy call for help sooner? And could Mary Jo have been saved? Kennedy gave a televised speech a week later, calling his actions indefensible and asked voters if he should resign. And despite public outrage, he never faced serious legal consequences. He pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident and got a suspended sentence. On December 6, 1969, approximately 300,000 people gathered at the Altamont Speedway in California for what was anticipated to be Woodstock West, a free concert headlined by the Rolling Stones. Instead, the night would turn into a tragedy. Security was being handled by the Hells Angels. And although that may seem like an odd choice, the Hells Angels had handled security before for both the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane and never had an incident. And according to the Rolling Stones tour manager, the Angels, who were allegedly paid in beer, weren't there to police the crowd. They were there to make sure nobody tampered with the generators and to keep people off the stage. As the day went on, the mood got darker. There were fights, people were getting hurt, and the atmosphere was tense. And by the time the Rolling Stones took the stage that night, things were out of control. And the night ended in the death of an 18-year-old fan named Meredith Hunter, who during a scuffle with the Angels was killed just feet from the stage as the Rolling Stones played Under My Thumb. There is footage of the incident that shows Hunter brandishing a weapon before being stabbed by one of the Angels, who was acquitted by a jury on the grounds of self defense. The concert that was supposed to be a celebration of peace and music instead became a nightmare. And speaking of nightmares, Hollywood in 1969 was full of stars, music, and bright lights. But it also was the year of one of the most infamous crimes in American history. And sadly, the people at the heart of it, the victims, are often overshadowed by the ones who committed the crime. Sharon Tate was one of Hollywood's rising stars. She had starred in Valley of the Dolls and was known not only for her beauty, but also for her kindness. She was married to director Roman Polanski and just weeks away from giving birth to her first child. Just past midnight on August 9th, Sharon was at her home in Benedict Canyon, a quiet upscale neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. Roman was out of the country for work, and Sharon, being so close to having her first baby, didn't want to be by herself, so a few close friends were staying with her. There was Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, her boyfriend, Wojciech Frykowski, and Jay Sebring, a well known celebrity hairstylist and former boyfriend of Sharon's. And there was Stephen Parent, who was just 18 years old. He had stopped by to visit a friend, the property's caretaker, and was hoping to sell him a clock radio. Just a quick visit before heading home. All of them were victims that night. The news sent shockwaves all through Hollywood and across the country. The idea that someone could break into a home and do something so horrific had gone from the unthinkable to a terrifying reality. And the crime spree didn't stop there, because the very next night, on August 10th, in another quiet Los Angeles neighborhood, Lino LaBianca, a successful businessman, and his wife Rosemary had just returned from Lake Isabel when Charles Manson entered through an unlocked door. He tied up the couple and then instructed a group of his followers to go in and finish what he started. Over the years, countless books and movies have focused on the Manson family, the people who committed these horrible crimes. But what often gets overshadowed in those sensationalized stories is the heartbreaking loss of the victims, their lives, their families, Sharon's baby, and the futures they never got to have. 1969 was a year of triumph and tragedy, filled with unforgettable moments and heartbreaking losses. Were you there when these stories made headlines? Did you watch the moon landing live? I'd love to hear your memories in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring this fascinating year, check out my video on the biggest pop culture moments in 1969. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this sort of content, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.